War is filled with death. It is filled with destruction. But there is something uniquely terrifying about the sea. On land, at least, soldiers can see the battlefield. They can feel the ground beneath their boots, hear the gunfire, and watch the horizon. But in the sea, in the endless blackness below the waves, there is only silence, pressure, and the knowledge that at any moment, steel and machinery might become your coffin. Submariners knew this fear well. They lived inside metal tubes deep beneath the ocean, where even the smallest malfunction could mean a slow, suffocating death. And yet, some submarines never sank with explosions, never left wreckage, never left survivors. They simply vanished. One such story, perhaps the most enduring, is of a submarine that disappeared without a trace, leaving behind no evidence, no wreckage, no answers. It is a story that has haunted naval history for over a century. A story that begins during the chaos of the First World War, continues into the Second, and echoes even into modern times as families and researchers alike ask the same question: how can something so large carrying so many men vanish completely? To understand this mystery, we must first understand the world of submarines in war. At the start of the 20th century, the submarine was still a new weapon. In World War I, the Germans launched their U-boats, Unterseeboote, and they terrorized the seas. They hunted Allied shipping, sinking merchant vessels and warships alike. For sailors, nothing was more terrifying than a torpedo appearing out of nowhere. But the submariners themselves paid a heavy price. Their boats were primitive, their air recycled, their engines deafening. They lived in filth and sweat, often for weeks at a time, their nerves stretched thin. And always there was the knowledge that a depth charge, or even a simple leak, could end them. By World War II, submarines were more advanced, but the dangers had not changed. American submariners hunted Japanese shipping across the Pacific. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic. British submarines struck in the Mediterranean. Hundreds of submarines were lost during the wars. Most left wreckage, oil slicks, or survivors. But a handful left nothing. One such case was the story of the USS Scorpion, SSN 589, a nuclear-powered American submarine that vanished in 1968. Another was the HMS Thetis, which sank in 1939 during sea trials, leaving 99 men dead. But perhaps the most mysterious of all is the story of the HMS K-13 in World War I, and later the tales of U-boats that disappeared without explanation. The K-class submarines were a disaster of British engineering. Massive, experimental, designed to keep up with the surface fleet, they were steam-powered. Yes, steam-powered submarines. They were plagued with flaws. On January 29, 1917, HMS K-13 was conducting trials in the Gareloch, Scotland. On board were 80 men. Without warning, the submarine flooded. It sank quickly, trapping most of the crew. Only a small number survived after desperate rescue efforts. The rest died in silence, their bodies retrieved later. It was a nightmare, but at least there were answers. But not every submarine gave answers. Some left only silence. The most famous case is that of the USS Scorpion. In May 1968, during the Cold War, Scorpion was returning from the Mediterranean to her home port in Norfolk, Virginia. She never arrived. 99 men were on board. For months, the Navy searched, families waited, rumors spread. Had she been sunk by the Soviets? Had a torpedo malfunctioned and detonated inside her? Eventually, the wreck was found, months later, deep in the Atlantic. She had imploded, but the mystery remains. Why? What exactly caused the disaster? And yet, some submarines were never found at all. The USS Grunion, SS-216, disappeared in 1942 after attacking Japanese shipping in the Aleutian Islands. No wreck was found until decades later. The French submarine Surcouf, the largest submarine of its time, vanished in 1942. Over 100 men disappeared with her. Some claimed she collided with an American freighter. Others whispered of sabotage, conspiracy, even alien intervention. The wreck was never located, but perhaps the most chilling stories come from the German U-boats. During World War II, dozens of U-boats vanished, never returning to port. Most were likely sunk by depth charges, but the survivors of other submarines told strange tales. Men who saw glowing lights beneath the sea, men who heard unnatural noises, men who claimed that something vast and dark moved below them, larger than any ship, larger than any whale. In the terror of war, hallucinations are easy to dismiss, but when entire crews report the same thing, the mystery deepens. One of the strangest accounts comes from U-28, a German U-boat in World War I. In 1915, after torpedoing the British steamer Iberian, the submarine's crew claimed that a massive sea creature was thrown into the air by the explosion. It looked, they said, like a giant crocodile, nearly 60 feet long. For years, the story was dismissed. But the captain himself, Georg von Forstner, swore to his deathbed that it was true. So when submarines vanish without a trace, one cannot help but wonder, were they lost to mechanical failure, enemy attack, or did they meet something older, something deeper, something waiting in the dark of the ocean? The story of the Surcouf, in particular, invites these questions. Surcouf was enormous, more like a submarine cruiser than a standard vessel. She carried aircraft, heavy guns, and a crew of over 100. In February 1942, she vanished in the Caribbean. No distress calls, no wreckage, no oil slick. Theories abound. Some say she was rammed accidentally by the American freighter Thompson Likes. Others claim she was sabotaged by Free French forces who did not trust her crew, many of whom were suspected of Vichy loyalties. Still others believe she was sunk intentionally, erased from history. But the strangest theory is that she simply disappeared, swallowed by the sea, leaving nothing behind. Decades later, divers searched for Surcouf. They scoured the seabed. Nothing. A submarine that massive, simply gone. It was as though the ocean had hidden her, refusing to give up her dead. And here is where the human mind begins to wander. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet. We have explored only a fraction of it, the depths of dark, crushing, alien. Strange life exists down there, in forms we can barely imagine. So when submarines vanish, is it so strange to think that maybe, just maybe, they were taken by something we do not understand? There is also the theory of time slips, strange rifts in reality where ships and planes vanish, only to appear decades later or never at all. The Bermuda Triangle is filled with such stories. Could submarines too be victims of such anomalies? Sailors are superstitious people, submariners even more so. They lived every day with death pressing around them, the sea ready to crush them at any moment. They told stories of phantom submarines, ghostly voices, and shadows in the deep. Some claimed to hear knocking on the hull from outside, even when hundreds of feet below the surface. Others claimed that, in their final moments, men went mad, speaking of shapes moving just beyond the steel. For the families, of course, these tales are little comfort. They want answers. They want closure. But the ocean does not give up its secrets easily. The submarine that vanishes without a trace is not just a tragedy of war. It is a reminder of how fragile we are, how little control we truly have over the natural world, and how vast the unknown remains. To this day, submarines disappear. In 2017, the Argentine submarine ARA San Juan vanished in the South Atlantic with 44 men aboard. For weeks, the world searched, families prayed, and when she was finally found months later deep on the ocean floor, it was clear she had imploded. But the pain of not knowing, of waiting, lingers. For a time, she too had joined the long line of submarines that had vanished without explanation. So what is the truth of these vanishings? Perhaps most can be explained by war, by machines pushed to their limits, by the merciless sea, but perhaps not all. Perhaps some were taken not by the enemy, not by accident, but by something deeper, something older, something that waits in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, that is why submarines are so terrifying. Because when one disappears, when no trace is left, we realize that even in our age of steel and science, there are still mysteries that we cannot solve.